The more hyphens you add to your game, the harder it is to keep things balanced. Alan Wake, as described on the website of developer Remedy Entertainment, is part psychological thriller, part action game. It's not an uncommon characterization, but it feels like not many games actually manage to bridge these two genres. You tend to have former horror series falling too far into action tropes, or action-adventure games that manage to only scrape the surface of horror mechanics. Part of that is due to the shaky genre classifications of video games. Click the annotation that's popping up at the top right of your screen right about now to go check out Extra Credits' episode on that topic. They do a great job outlining the challenges and even a few potential solutions to that problem. The other dilemma, the one we're going to talk about, tends to revolve around pacing, and how designers decide on just how much of a horror or action atmosphere they want to feed into their game minute to minute. The tactics Remedy uses to mix genres provide a great study of crafting gameplay flow. Whether or not you find satisfaction in Alan Wake's story, the path the game takes to tell it is littered with interesting design choices. Take, for example, Episode 4 of the main story campaign, The Truth. Some cliff notes for those that haven't played. Alan Wake, a thriller novelist wallowing in 2 years of writer's block, takes a mental vacation to the small Washington town of Bright Falls. Something's amiss in the mountain hamlet, however, and before long his wife Alice gets dragged away by supernatural forces straight out of Wake's nightmares. In pursuing her, Wake faces down what he comes to call the Dark Presence, manifesting in some shadowy townsfolk bent on his death, called the Taken, and all manner of possessed objects darting for his head. After getting stood up by his wife's supposed kidnapper, Alan gets knocked out in the wake of a shadow tornado, and wakes up under psychological evaluation no less, in the Cauldron Lake Lodge. The tale Remedy weaves is frequently told through lengthy plot interludes between the game's more run-and-gun encounters. These narrative segments are heavy on conversation, either in person or previously recorded, with plenty of items and collectibles to pick up over the course of each meandering talk. At the start of The Truth, we are following Dr. Hartman, the psychologist Alice booked for Wake in order to figure out his writer's block. The good doctor attributes Wake's horrific encounters from episodes past to post-traumatic delusions. Hartman is one of many Bright Falls citizens to not believe Alan's tale of his wife's kidnapping, instead proclaiming her dead, her death crippling Wake mentally. Our walk and talk with the doc seems to indicate that we've been here for much longer than the transition between episodes would have us believe. Eventually, Wake is told to return to his room and write as part of his therapy. Once we're inside Wake's room, the inmates rebel, and our task becomes breaking into Dr. Hartman's office. A few audio tapes inside said office dole out some conversation with Dr. Hartman and Alice, the latter worried about Wake's mental state. Before long, the Dark Presence seeps into the clinic, prompting our escape. Wake's quick use of a generator and some flares lands him outside the clinic, where his friend and literary agent Barry hands him a flashlight. A nearby hedge maze hides some supplies and a few close encounters. After puzzling out the maze, we encounter a boss taken in a gazebo, a path riddled with shadowy townsfolk, a possessed wheelbarrow, and a treacherous cliffside. We eventually meet up with Barry again at the locked exit to a courtyard. As he searches for the key to the gate, Wake has to face down a horde of Taken. Surviving the encounter, Alan runs through the gate and into a cutscene conversation with Barry. The car they are driving in soon crashes violently, separating the two before they can reach their destination, Anderson Farm. A litany of Taken, a couple car rides between abandoned houses, and a few more pieces of possessed farm equipment later, Wake finally makes it down to the farm property. The field of said farm is dominated by a gigantic outdoor concert stage, complete with pyrotechnics. Barry, being one of the few people in the game with common sense, gets on the effects board and lights up the night. Wake then takes center stage to fend off some more waves of Taken. Barry will occasionally be able to drop some spotlights on Wake for a bit of healing, and shoot off damaging spark showers across the front of the stage, but for the most part, it's up to Alan and his supply of light-related weaponry to keep the Taken at bay. Surviving for long enough sets off a light show and a distant explosion, opening the way to the outbuildings near the farmhouse. Removing the object in front of a barn yields a few collectibles and an ambush, and as Barry heads off further down the road, Wake finds his path again blocked by Taken and cursed vehicles. Clearing the way out leads to a climactic showdown with a possessed harvester, and a bit of gate pushing with Barry. Once inside, there are a few more opportunities to grab some collectibles before a series of cutscenes drops a major plot bomb in Wake's and the player's lap. Alan Wake makes for a particularly strong mixed genre game, and that's largely thanks to Remedy feeding minute-to-minute action game mechanics into horror game aesthetics. The designers lay out each episode as a blend of unsettling, anxious horror and tense action. In Episode 4, we see meaty narrative exploration segments bookending action points, with Wake's internal narration and collectible pages from an ethereal manuscript furthering the story along as we dive into the woods. Once we escape the clinic, lighting, audio cues, and gameplay direction help dictate which side of the genre hyphen Alan Wake plays to at any given point. The grounds of the clinic and the woods surrounding the town are designed to keep players on edge, dimly lit environments with sometimes jarring audio transitions. The blindingly bright lights over gates and safe zones stand in sharp contrast to the shaded combat arenas we spend most of our time in. Enemy spawn points aren't strongly telegraphed, and we usually only encounter Taken in small groups in tight quarters. Even the courtyard showdown with the waves of Taken is laid out in a space defined by borders, with the rails on the stairs leading us down into a courtyard with rows of wooden beams. The flow of enemies forces us to be on the move constantly, with plenty of barriers to run into and get trapped against. The wilderness around Bright Falls offers a bit more of a transitory vibe when it comes to genre tropes. Combat spaces here allow for a bit more mobility, initiating in more open areas with less clutter to get hung up on. The transition into combat is more telegraphed here as well, with the tree line beginning to rustle wildly as a wind picks up and the game's score begins to rise in tempo. Once we reach the farm and its stage, almost all of the horror pretense is briefly abandoned for one of the game's most satisfying action payoffs. Wake's position is mostly fixed, and the Taken descend in visible waves, straight out of a multiplayer shooter's horde mode. The pyrotechnics extend far beyond the stage border, periodically lighting up the length of the field and providing plenty of opportunities for players to keep abreast of the oncoming wave. We get a brief lull in between major fights during our exploration of the farm's outbuildings, with added comedy from Barry, before diving into full camp horror territory shooting up farm equipment. The closing chapter of the episode serves to set up the next installment, driving in another twist that we'll get a chance to explore in the game's next episode. The same tactics that help mitigate Alan Wake's difficulty, readily available ammo, slowdown effects before certain enemy attacks, frequently placed healing zones, also help the game keep some claim in both genres. Wake as a hero is a bit over-equipped for a horror game, but still weak and overwhelmed by action standards. A hyphen could be a tricky thing. Not many gamers will put stock into a first-person real-time strategy visual novel. But a bit of good genre alchemy can go a long way when a team excels at implementing the minute-to-minute mechanics of each kind of experience. Alan Wake works, for the most part, as a psychological thriller hyphen action game because it flavors the spirit of a thriller with consistent action peaks. Its fourth episode flows from a pulpy TV show opener into a spooky-turned-frantic jaunt in the woods before finally exploding into a pair of bombastic showdowns. The peaks and valleys of both genres are happily married here, and the result is a great hybrid experience.
I wrote it. It's my fault.
That's right, James Joyce. It's your fault, and you're gonna pay for it.